In this episode, we're going to cover budgets and how to manage them. It's a two-part episode, and this is part one. As we go through, you'll see a number of example documents, and you can always find more videos as well as sample documents at starterculture.com. We've all managed some sort of budget before, but I want to get in the weeds here and share how you should think about a budget and manage it as if you were a VP of marketing or a CMO. So we'll cover where do budgets come from, what you can do about it, budget building and strategy, balancing a marketing budget, and as always, crevasses, tree wells, quicksand, and other pitfalls. A quick refresher will help. If you haven't seen the videos on P&Ls or revenue, you might want to take a peek at both of those since they both sit upstream of budget, so to speak. From the P&L episode, we saw that a marketing budget, often called A&P or advertising and promotions, is a part of the P&L and usually budgeted for by finance and general management somewhere around the beginning of the year. And in the revenue episode, we saw that a budget is a forecast. It's based on a prediction of how the business will go and how you want it to go in the coming year. We also saw that one way of forecasting that budget is to look at past and current business trends, including invoice sales and in a wholesale business, bookings. So budgets are largely set over your head. You can lobby for a certain amount, but the final decision usually rests with the business leader, or even above his or her head with boards or investors. Not only is it out of your hands, it's discretionary, meaning that how much of a role advertising and promotions will play in a business is a judgment call from year to year. That judgment is often expressed as a percentage of planned revenue. Different businesses at different times in their growth will have different benchmarks. A startup or scaling business may devote a significant portion of revenue to marketing. Growth requires a lot of grease. A mature business with great brand awareness and great distribution may only need to allocate a few percent of revenue to A&P. The other discretionary call is how much money to allocate for brand marketing, what you use to make people aware of the brand and generally create demand, versus performance marketing, which is spending against short-term transactions. That's a big topic and we'll cover it in another episode. But it's a tricky balance to get it right. And that, again, depends on where a business is in its life cycle. The most important takeaway is that budget is strategy. An unfunded program is not likely to make much of a difference. Reaching consumers costs money, and determining how you allocate that money is a key part of your marketing strategy. In fact, many business leaders will only half pay attention to marketing strategies expressed in words. Most will say, "Show me the money." A good leader can infer a marketing strategy from how you've set the budget. So let's start with strategy. How do you do it? Well, hopefully you have something to go by. A starter is a strategic plan or a long-range plan, LRP. This is not the responsibility of marketing alone. In a well-functioning organization, an LRP is created by the leadership team and serves as a roadmap for the long-term steering of the business. It's consulted and updated at the start of each product or sales cycle, and it helps marketers know what to focus on today, tomorrow, and farther down the road. You may create a long-range messaging or marketing plan as a marketer's takedown of the LRP, as in this example here. Not only does it help focus your organization, it helps define the future in more achievable chunks. You're unlikely to be able to do everything in a given budget year. So knowing what you can get to this year and what you will tackle next year helps pace yourself and helps you manage your budget. Ideally, that long-range plan gets boiled down into a yearly marketing plan. This doesn't have to be complicated. You can express it by discipline. What are you going to try to do in each of your marketing channels to achieve your overall yearly goals? And importantly, how are you going to define success and measure with some KPIs for each channel? With that in place, you can think about how you can start allocating dollars. This is often called a bottoms-up budget. You're working up from your channel goals to figure out how much money do you need to achieve those goals. There's a second pass later when you compare that to what's actually been assigned to your budget. You will likely have to do some adjusting. But if you start with a bottoms up, you'll know not just how much money goes into each channel, but why you need that amount of money. That helps a lot as you explain your strategy to other people. Here we've done a bottoms up by program or marketing sub-discipline. More on how we break things out and why in a minute. But here we see a summary of what we think we will need for media and assets and partnerships and the like to make this year's marketing strategy work. There's going to be a lot of scratch pad work behind the scenes to get you this point. In assets, for example, you might start with how many assets did you create last year and what did it cost? And then what are your content goals for this year and how might those differ? So what do you have to add or subtract from last year's budget to achieve this year's goals? Once you get to a budget, you're going to be asked to share it. And people will be dying to see it as a pie chart, generally with a slice of pie for each of the major buckets in your budget. This lets an audience see very quickly where you'll be focusing the bulk of your efforts. In this case, supporting direct-to-consumer and Amazon marketing and brand media being the biggest slices of the pie. You might also be asked about working and non-working dollars. This is a kind of an antiquated way of thinking about marketing dollars, but it can be a useful way to get a guess on how efficient your marketing spending is. Working means the dollars that result in direct consumer impressions. Think media spend. Non-working means what you have to spend behind the scenes to make the stuff that gets those impressions. Think advertising agency fees. This gets into ideology pretty quickly. Are photography costs for website assets working or non-working? You'll have to play this by ear depending on how your business is wired. You can see in this bottoms up that it's broken out into about a dozen categories from brand media to other. In some ways, these category names aren't important. They should just make sense to you and your team. You're likely to have to map them to something else anyway for budget management purposes. What am I talking about? I'm talking about a GL or general ledger. In every business, no matter what the size, there's someone keeping the books, doing the accounting and financial planning. These teams use accounting and financial planning systems to record and track every penny going through the business. They're the keepers of the information, so they get to set the format. And it's generally a format that is not helpful to anyone except the finance and accounting teams. Odds are, for a marketing budget, you will be asked to manage your funds through a series of general ledger accounts, or lines as they're called. Each line represents a bucket of money in the marketing budget. And odds are you are not the one to determine what those buckets were or how they were named. If you're lucky, they'll line up with how you actually think about managing your marketing budget. But it's more likely than not that they will be a mix of appropriate GLs, like digital advertising, and ones too vague to be useful, like promotions in this example. That's why I suggest starting with the classification system that works best for you. You are managing programs and channels, not GLs. In any case, there's going to be some translation required for the way you think about your budgets and the way the business records them. You're going to have to map your programs from your bottoms up to the GL lines provided by the business, and that can get complicated. Good news, I have a tool for that. Stay tuned for more in Budgets Episode 2. We'll talk about how to build your budget so that it makes sense to you and can still map to GLs. And we'll talk about reconciling your budget on a monthly basis and planning for the future. That's it. Thanks for your time.